Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Justin. I'm part of the community and stakeholder consultation team here at AusNet Services. So we welcome you this evening for tonight's webinar. As part of the stakeholder engagement team, we've put together tonight's presentation around agriculture and forestry. So we'll be coming to you with that very shortly. We'll just wait a few moments for a few more that are just joining us and logging on. So we'll just give it another 30 seconds or a minute, and then we'll kick off. So thanks, everyone. I think we've got a lot of people on that have registered, so I think we're almost there with everyone. So we'll kick off now. So tonight, as I mentioned, our webinar on agriculture and forestry. Tonight you'll hear from Duncan Wallace about the significant volume of work that's been undertaken in the investigation of the existing conditions report surrounding the topic of agriculture and forestry. So Duncan will be coming to you live shortly. But first of all, I'd like to undertake a welcome to country. So on behalf of everyone with us here today, we acknowledge the various traditional owners of the lands on which we meet this evening today, and we repay their respects to the elders past, present and emerging. We also acknowledge those Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders that will be here with us and logged on tonight. What we'll cover today, so a presentation, as I mentioned, by a technical specialist in Duncan Wallace, followed by a question and answer session. So do encourage you to get your questions in as they come to mind. So if there's a topic there, send them through, pop them in the chat box at the bottom, and we can grab them then and get them ready, just so we don't miss out. We've had some feedback that some people didn't get their questions in early enough, and we have a fair few to get through. So that'll be the format for this evening. So I'll hand you over very shortly to Duncan Wallace, but a bit about Duncan. He's grown up on a farm in central Victoria, studied agriculture engineering at Melbourne University, still a current farmer today, also working as an environmental and agricultural consultant with RMCG for the past 17 years, and worked on numerous linear infrastructure projects, including some of the ones mentioned there, Goldfield Super Pipe, the Lance Creek in Leongat, and the Winnicarribee line in Goulburn, New South Wales. So, as I mentioned, still remains a farmer with an interest, partnership with his brother, produced fine wool in their family farm up near Seymour. So we welcome Duncan this evening, and we're really looking forward to his presentation. Before we do kick in, there is some housekeeping. So there are many participants in the webinar, and so for that reason, all attendees are muted. Just some further ground rules, I guess. Offensive language and personal attacks won't be tolerated. So Duncan's given up his time to come and present as much of the facts around this subject matter that he can, and also from the staff behind the scenes running it. So please be mindful of your language and questioning that you do submit. Unfortunately, not all the questions can be answered. So like I said earlier, if you can get your questions in, that'd be great. It gives us a really good chance to formulate them and put them to our presenter. Any questions that aren't answered, what we'll do is we will update our frequently asked questions sheet on our website, which will include the answer for you. So any questions we don't get through to tonight, we will follow up with in the coming days. As I mentioned earlier, pop your questions directly into the chat box at the bottom of your screen, and that'll help us collate them all so we can get them to the presenter. The session tonight finishes at 8:30. Our slideshow isn't that long, which will give us plenty of time to ask questions, but again, get them in. And just a reminder too, that that's one of the good reasons why it's, if you can, to book a one-on-one session with the specialist at a later date through our website, so you'll be able to get as many questions in as you like. So it's just some of the housekeeping for this evening. And from a project timeline perspective, so tonight we're talking about the existing condition reports that have been submitted to the technical reference group. So Duncan's going to present on that. He's here to share the findings of the agricultural and forestry around the existing conditions. And at this stage, we cannot answer any questions about the potential impacts because that work is still yet to be undertaken. So we're still in the process of doing that. So tonight it's all around existing conditions. So some questions that we do receive, unfortunately, do venture into that, I guess, category of potential impacts. But as I reiterate each night, the fact we can't answer those just yet. So we still do encourage you strongly to book a one-on-one session if you do have further questions. So that's it from me. I'll now hand over to Duncan, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. I know Duncan's put a lot of work into it, so really hope people get a fair bit out of it. Thank you. Over to you, Duncan.
Thank you, Justin, for that introduction. Look, I'd like to also acknowledge the various traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to the elders past, present and future. So thanks for having me tonight. I'm in Bendigo. For the last 24 hours I've been expecting some rain, and I can report, I suppose, that it is here. It's gentle but steady, and I guess it's heading away down to that project area. I'm presenting tonight on behalf of RNCG. I guess our company is engaged to do the agricultural and forestry assessment for the EES for the project. I'm one member of that team. We have other members of the team who are also working on the project and have specialist inputs in some of the other different aspects of agriculture as well. Just to begin with, I'll give an overview of my presentation. So today, as we said, we're talking about agriculture and forestry. It's good in a sense that agriculture and forestry gets its own special consideration in a study like in an EES like this. It just demonstrates, I guess, the importance of it. So firstly, I'll mention the formal requirements of the EES that we must address. Then I'll summarise some of the feedback that we've already heard so far through some of the preliminary consultation phases. Then I'll show some maps which illustrate the land production along in the area of interest and also some of the current land uses in the project area. Then we'll talk about some of the various commodities known to be produced along the corridor, and I'll touch on the importance of decision-making and management in farming. And finally, I've got a series of photographs which we can use to illustrate the context, the existing uses along in the area of interest. And after that, I'll be happy to take questions. So this slide shows an extract from the formal scoping requirements for the project, which were developed by the Victorian DELP, Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning. I've only highlighted some of the scoping requirements. There are more than these, but really, look, the main ones that are relevant to agriculture and forestry. So we must describe the existing activities taking place within the area of interest. And that's the focus of tonight's presentation, that first line there. But also, obviously, I guess it's environmental effect statement. We must also address the potential adverse impacts on agriculture and other forms of farming. So that impact assessment phase is still ahead of us, and that work will be done over the next few months. A significant amount of consultation has already taken place and there will be more opportunities coming up in the future. This slide illustrates some of the key themes that have already been raised through the consultation that we've had so far. So the presence of the prime agricultural land is high in people's thoughts and has been a subject of many submissions. And as we'll see later, it's a genuine point to make. There's a wide range of farming land uses, and there's concern about the possibility that construction and ongoing operation of the transmission line could alter or restrict farmers' ability to continue to use the land. The importance of the implication, I guess, for irrigation and other high vehicles has been raised, and will be something that it does get addressed. The farming is a social and often a family activity, I guess, and many farmers have long association with their land. I should have mentioned before, but there's other studies that are being done in parallel with the agriculture and forestry. So that long association with land and the social impacts of the project, there is a discipline that will deal with those social impacts as well. The importance of the potato industry has been specifically mentioned, including a submission from a major processor in the area. The next stage of our study will look at the direct farming impacts and including potatoes, but the other forms of agriculture along the route. And again, to mention another related study, there's an economic study that will be produced, so we'll be looking at the agriculture and I guess particularly at the farm scale, looking at what the impacts literally of the transmission line might be. We will look a little bit beyond the farm gate, but there's an economic study which will look at the wider implications of what the implications might be of the project. So I've covered most of those, but we've got, I guess, one of the themes of this tonight is that it's a large study area. So there's traditional agriculture going on in there, and I'll be mentioning that quite a lot. But one of the things that we are also keen to hear, I guess, is and understand is what sort of different farming activities might be going on there. So we've got some niche farming systems which we've heard about, and we'd love to hear from people in relation to those, just so we get a full picture of all of the agriculture in the area. And we've got the issues of the aeroplanes and whether or not people will still be able to use the aeroplanes. Again, there's an aviation study that's being done there, which will be looking at the implications of the project on the aeroplanes and the air industry. Fire risk to farmland is again being raised as a concern, and again I can say that there's a study that's specifically looking at the bushfires and the risks of the project for that. I suppose the final thing there raised is shelter for stock, and really more generally, I guess there's in amongst the material that we've heard from people, there's lots of detail which is about the concern, about the potential impacts, I guess, on people, about what the project might do for things like the way in which they manage their stock and the way in which they run their properties. So we will use that feedback so far, and plus anything else we hear over the next month or so to inform our understanding of the existing conditions and our assessment of the impacts. So I now have 3 maps of the study area. I'll just show you the 3 maps. There's the first map, there's the second map, and there's the third map. These 3 maps, I'll go back to the first one, they all have show the same area. We've got Ararat over here, down to Beaufort, Buninyong, Ballarat in there, down here to Melbourne at this end, so Sunbury over here, and up through the study area, we've got Bacchus Marsh, Ballan, Bungaree, Creswick, Ascot, Clunes, Warborough, Amphitheatre, Glen Lofty, and Joljol. So And then north up here, we've got Maryborough, Kencurran Reservoir, Tullaroot Reservoir, and it's just to give you a feeling for where we are. So that's what that map's showing us, the spatial area, but the black outline on that map is the area of interest. So that is the area of interest that we've done the existing conditions assessment on, and now I'll start talking about what's in the background on the map. We've got, as I said before, these black areas are some of the larger water bodies. I think this is Lake Burrumbete down here, and that's just for context. But the green shades are what's important, and that's what I really want to talk about on this map. So the various shades of green on this map show an interpretation of state government data, and this data shows land production potential. And the way in which this works is the government data set has combined pretty much three different things, which I've tried to show there on the left. So it looks at what's the underlying soil, and clearly soil is a major determinant in sort of agricultural productivity. But then it's also other things like rain patterns. I guess you'll be expecting in the higher rainfall parts, they'll be expecting more rain tonight than perhaps in the lower rainfall areas, and it's just the function of the geography. And then there's also the availability of irrigation water. So the darkest green areas have sort of got those three things lined up really well. And this map doesn't cover the whole state, but the dark green here, we can see this is an area around Bungaree. It's getting 9 out of 10. All around in here, sort of south of Ballarat. We're actually outside the study area here, but for context, I'm giving you the full picture. And then up around here, we've really got this solid, high production potential land in the centre of the study area. So as we move further up to the north, the soil types change, the rainfall reduces, the availability of irrigation water is just not there, and the sorts of figures we've got up here are 6 and 7 and 5 and 4. Down here is interesting, I guess, in near Ballyang and Exford area, there's actually some reasonably good soils in that part of the world, but it's a little bit of a rain shadow, and hasn't in the past there hasn't been the availability of irrigation water in that area. So the soils contribute to the land production potential, but it's not sort of the combination of those three different things combined together. So I think in summary, what that really tells us, it's a statewide data set, and it is broad scale information. We can't be zooming in on that data set and looking about comparing one property to the other, but it does give us a very clear indication that of the land production potential along the project area. And I suppose it confirms that the lands in the midsection of the project area is some of the best in the state. So this second map shows land uses in agriculture, and there's a fair bit going on in the map, so I'll make sure that I try and make it clear. So my colleagues and I, we drove along the project area in February this year, and we noted various land uses along the way. But as with such a wide study area, we looked for other data sets to inform our fuller understanding of the existing conditions. So this map shows the primary production land uses in the year of 2017, as was coded by the Victorian Land Use Information System. And that's the VLUIS, I'll call it, Victorian Land Use Information. It is a Victorian statewide data set maintained by the government, and it classifies the use on all land parcels across the whole state. The key things that I think we should note from here, so we've got exactly the same footprint as what we had before. The white area I've taken out of the map really, so it's public land and urban land, which isn't of such interest to the agriculture and forestry study, so I've just whited that out. The distinct dominant orange tan colour, which is really everywhere, I guess, within the study area and in the surrounds, that's perhaps not as helpful as it could be. It's classified as mixed farming and grazing. So as we'll hear later on, there's quite a few different commodities produced across the study area, and that's one of the codes that they use to define those mixed uses. Some of the pure grazing land has been identified near Lexton and further to north. So we've got in the legend here, we can see livestock grazing. So we've got livestock grazing here and then up and around there. So it's the grey area. So I guess the people coding the data have to make a decision one way or the other, whether it's grazing or mixed farming, but that's the way it's been done. Cropping land is shown as more this darker orange colour. So you can see down here in the Western District and up here on the Malort Plains, and you can see just starting out here in the Wimmera, the upper Wimmera there, we've got some agricultural cropping's been identified, and we have got one patch here within the study area. Now look, we know that there's more cropping going on in the area than that, but that's an indication, I guess, that we're not really dealing with the same broad scale cropping as you might see in some of those other areas. The dark green is the commercial forestry, and again within the study area we've got the Clunes Creswick area, or the Creswick area there. We've got the forestry in there, and not much. I suppose there's some of it up in Lexton. I've got another slide which we can look at in a moment, which has got more detail about that. The light green colours are the vineyards, I guess, up in the Pyrenees, up here, Glen Lofty area, and up further north in the Pyrenees. And even though, just to finish off the last few points, we've got a code here for horticulture, fruit and vegetable crops, and the Bacchus Marsh Irrigation District is being coded for that, which is an indication that it's sort of, a centre for that sort of thing. I guess one of the main questions when we first looked at this data was to say, well, what about potato growing? Why is it not shown why is there not more brown in and around here? I think the reason for that, we think, is it's not showing up on this land use system, even though it's a long running and well-established land use in the area. There's no doubt about that. But perhaps because of its rotational nature, looking at aerial photographs and looking at sequences of different aerial photographs, it moves. You can see because of the rotational nature of the farming systems for potatoes. There'll be irrigation one year, but then the next year that land is spelled from potatoes and used for something else. So it perhaps just shows up for the people who code this system as just a mixed farming use, because there are mixed uses in those rotational years, and we've seen that, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So just to finish off, the hatched area is something that we did, and I did do this back in May, and it's possibly not perfect, but to fill that gap in the information, we've attempted there to show the footprint of where we think agriculture, the potato growing is within the study area. In reality, we've got more of it up around up here, and I guess if we look back at the previous map, we've really, you can see the association, the connection between the best land and the potato growing area in the areas. So that's the land uses in the within the area of interest. And then just on this, the third and final map, this is just picks out the forestry and shows that the areas, the dark green, the softwood plantations, and the blue, I guess it is the hardwood in the area. So as I said before, we've got some softwoods in around here, and then when we get up here, we've got some of the hardwood forestry happening just adjacent to and partially within the area of interest. We did check this data to some extent to the main forest forestry businesses, HVP and Midway. They published on their websites where those patches of forestry are, current forest plots. And there's quite a good alignment, as you expect. It's fairly easy to tell from there what's forestry. So this data set aligns quite well with that published data by those forestry businesses. So just to turn now to the commodities, and look, there are quite a lot. We've got a long study area. We've got difference, as we've seen, land production potential along the way, and I guess it's important to start to say that most of the area is used for farming of some sort, and a lot of it is used for grazing in particular. The really good dark green land on the first map that can sustain some of the more intensive uses, such as the horticulture. So this list summarises some of the main commodities produced within the project area. Any one property may produce 2 or 3 or more commodities, and it can vary from year to year. The potatoes, we heard before that they're only grown in the midsection of the project area on the best soils where there's irrigation available. They can yield very high production per hectare. Other horticultures, Bacchus Marsh area, as I said, but also on rotation within the potato growing areas. Beef cattle and lambs, so they can be raised to produce meat almost everywhere along the whole project area, but predominantly they'd be in the higher rainfall parts and on the better soils. And again, in combination with the rotation of the potatoes. Crops also grown along many parts of the area. Broad break of crops are evident in the high production high productive midsection and at the western end. Wool production as a broadacre venture is less profitable per hectare, but occurs conjunctively with most other uses, and also across the lower capability land towards the western end. Other uses such as piggeries, poultry farms might occur in isolated pockets across the project area. Vineyards we saw before in the Pyrenees. Artisanal agriculture, well, that can occur pretty much wherever people choose to do it, but they're high intensity, I guess, and but smaller in scale. Agritourism and hobby farms, I guess, are slightly on the edge of our considerations here. And just to finish, we've got, as we said before, we've got the 2 different types of forestry. So just to end the talking part, and we'll move on to some photographs in a minute. We've really, I guess, what the point of this slide, and there's a lot of words there, it's really to appreciate that farming isn't just what you can see out the car window. Behind the scenes, there is an endless series of decisions and operations and business management decisions that need to be made by the people managing the land. And I'll touch quickly on the time criticalness of some aspects of that. There's no hard and fast rule about what a farmer can grow on or produce on their property. Each individual farm business makes that choice themselves. This slide is meant to illustrate some of the variables that influence those farm management decisions. So different farmers have different skills and experience and appetite for risk. Some are more happy to operate sort of low input, low return, low risk operations. Others are prepared to take more risks and potentially can yield higher returns. All these decisions take place within the constraints of the land, as we've seen before. That's variable. Industry support can play an important role to what can be done on a farm. The historic level of development in machinery that influences future options and future choices. The business of farming, getting the best price for your produce, understanding the market, securing contracts for sale, purchase of inputs, and they're all critical factors to business success. The climates, the seasons, bad weather, they all need to be contended with. Water for irrigation is one thing, and then there's also water for stock, can be really critical in dry times. Biosecurity management, pest control, weed management, pasture management, they're all important operational considerations. Keeping stock in good health, they all require special observation of skills and care. So the availability of labour and capital, just to finish, they also frame the decisions there. A farmer who relies on their own individual labour, they can achieve a certain amount, but commercial scale enterprises need to employ labour and other businesses to get those economies of scale. So before I finish on this slide, farming is, as I said, it's a series of decisions and scheduling things. And I guess the importance for a construction project like this really is that having an awareness of those seasonal activities, what's happening on a farm operationally, when the harvest is, when the sowing is, when the spraying happens, when lambing is happening, when calving is happening. All of those things are critical to a farm, and it's not every day is the same, and we need to be taking that into account. So the remainder of my slides show some photographs we took on our visit back in February. I'll run through these pretty quickly, but we can come back to any during question time. Broadly, the photographs moved from the western end through across to the eastern end. This one's showing some at the western end near Lexington, showing the cleared easement underneath the existing 220 kV transmission line. And we've got some blue gums, young looking blue gum plantation there. This one is near the Warborough area. It's a crop of dry land loosened, some bales of fodder waiting to be carted in. And yeah, we've got a similar area. We've got some beef cattle grazing on some improved pasture. Looking pretty good nick. Here we're north near Ascot, near Clunes. We've got some probably non-improved pasture here, probably perhaps some poorer land, I guess, and we've got some ewes and lambs grazing. This photo shows near Lampeed and Hepburn Lagoon, shows the 220 kV line heading north to Bendigo. It shows stubble from a cereal crop occurring underneath that line. Here we've got some potatoes near Mount Prospect. The source of the water, I guess, is either groundwater or surface water dams, or perhaps a combination even of both. These sprinklers look to be hand-shifted sprinklers. Didn't get out, we couldn't go in and have a look, but there are different irrigation systems. Is certainly one thing that we've noted along the route. So they've been irrigated with sprinklers on the ground. Here in the same part of the area, we've got some near Mount Prospect. This is summer crop here, radish or turnip. This is grown to finish the lambs towards the end of the season, improve their condition to get them ready for sale and slaughter. This part of the study area is down near Springbank, in amongst where the very reliable irrigation occurs. The reason I've taken this photograph, I guess, is it illustrates that it's a managed groundwater area. So these are state observation bores which are measured regularly by the water corporations to manage the groundwater resource in the aquifer and help managing the amount of water taken for irrigation under licence in that area. Here we're still moving west, so we're east, we're near Springbank again, got some hay bales in the front and two different types of irrigation in the back. So on the left is a centre pivot irrigator, which is fixed in the middle and goes around in a circle. And that's that one there. It's quite an efficient type form of irrigation in terms of both water efficiency and labour. And on the right is what is known, I guess, as it's a travelling irrigator or a big gun irrigator. You might have seen them around, but they're less efficient, I guess, in terms of distribution uniformity, but they're more flexible to move around than perhaps the other ones are. here near Springbank again, we've got what's called a lateral move irrigator. This is the same principle as the centre pivot, except the whole machine moves laterally as a rectangle up and down the paddock rather than in a circle. They can actually pivot on the end and do a racetrack. This one looks quite new and has sophisticated controls with programmable, perhaps even remote control operation. Just a couple more. This is a summer crop with some cattle grazing and intensive shedding in the back. I'm not sure what that operation is there, but productive landscape, agricultural landscape there. And this one is some haymaking down the Glenmore Valley. I've got the distinctive purple flower there of a lucerne stand in the process of being mown. That was in February, as I said before, so possibly a second, maybe even a third cut, depending upon that the dryland lucerne in that context. So, look, thanks for taking the time, and I've run over my time a little bit, but thanks for taking your time for coming to this session tonight. Just to summarise the key points, so existing conditions will inform the impact assessment. Most of the routes used for farming of one sort or other. The land production potential varies along the route, depending upon that combination of soil type, rainfall and access to irrigation. A variety of agricultural commodities is produced from each farm and the region. What a farmer chooses to choose is their own individual, it's up to them. Farm operation and farm management is a continuous juggle of decisions and choices. And many of those farm activities are seasonal and time critical. So we might not get to talk through all the questions in tonight's chat, but I would like to take the opportunity, Justin will mention it in a minute, but there are, in the next fortnight coming up, we've got one-on-one sessions available where my colleagues and I are available, and would love to hear specifics, stories about the agriculture that's occurring along the route. Thank you.
Tremendous, Duncan. Thanks very much for a very thorough presentation in the findings of the existing conditions. So it's generated some questions, and we'll pretty much roll into those straight away. And one of the first ones that was sent in was from Moira. So Moira's asked, are we aware of culturally significant trees and forestry in the forestry areas? So just on that one, Moira, that's actually part of the Aboriginal cultural heritage and historical heritage studies. So that's not being addressed by RMCG, who Duncan works for. But what I can do is take that offline, and we can pop that in the frequently asked questions, or we'll get back to you soon in relation to that. But actually doesn't formulate part of tonight's discussion, unfortunately. Which moves into the next question that we've got. Duncan's from Anne. Anne's just sent in one around Pikes Creek and Lake Miramu are not included on the land production potential map. They're in the corridor. Why are they missing from the map?
Might have to go back to the map, Justin, and have a look. Can I do that?
Yeah, for sure. Yep. If you want to go back and share your screen, without a doubt, I'll just jump off so we can have a look.
So, Pikes Creek, I guess we're talking down around here in Miramu.
Yep.
So, I mean, this is the area where, so Miramu is just there north of Bacchus Marsh, and Pikes Creek would be around here. I mean, they're not shown as reservoirs just because that's the data set, and once it gets to a certain scale, it doesn't pick out the water bodies. I guess the more important thing, and I'm not sure on the question in particular, but is that as we get head down in this direction here, those the soils are probably changing for sure. The rainfall, I think these bands you can see in the back here would be rainfall bands. So we've sort of got higher rainfall band in there, and then we've sort of got a band there of lower rainfall, and then perhaps even lower rainfall again. down here. So, I mean, the area is covered on that map in terms of land production potential, but I guess those actual dams themselves, the Pikes Creek and Lake Mariner, which were mentioned, they're not shown just because of the scale of the map.
So the bodies of water just haven't come up in the data set then, pretty much.
Right.
Okay, no worries. Thanks for that one. And hopefully that answers your question. If you need any more, feel free just to shoot another one through. Now, Duncan, we've got one from John. John's saying, are you talking to the VFF and other industry bodies? If a transmission line wire cuts across my field, would you expect there to be any loss of yield?
Okay, so there's the two questions there, and the answer to the first one is that yes, we've got a commitment to talk to different agencies, and we will be doing that. And the second question was, can you just repeat?
The question was, if the transmission line does cut across someone's field, would you expect there to be any loss of yield?
So I guess we're thinking about it in the two stages of the job. So during construction, there will be a period of time where access to that strip will be limited. So there'll be that sort of short term during construction. We've got an expectation there would be a loss of productivity there. I think depending upon, when you look in the longer term, where the towers, where the footprint of the towers is, like we saw in those photographs before of the existing transmission lines, clearly those will be taken out of sort of the production in the normal area. But as we've seen in other areas, and as is described in the guideline, which is available on the website, the uses underneath the transmission line within the easement really aren't restricted all that much. The big gun irrigators, one of the things that are pointed out there. So obviously big gun jets of water, power lines, they don't mix all that well, and they are there. But those lateral move, center pivot irrigators, those sorts of things, cropping, those sorts of activities, in my understanding of it, is that they will be able to continue underneath, so that the production underneath there should really remain unchanged. Okay.
Thanks for that, Duncan. So that was actually two questions, one from John, the first one, and Ian, who sent through the second one. So thanks for that. We've got one from Margaret. So Margaret sent in, my small farm is not represented on your map. Are you only considering farms at a larger scale?
So thanks, Margaret. Look, we're not. I think that the presentation tonight, it's a quick presentation really, but part of our study is to get down into more detail. We'll be looking using mapping and detailed aerial images and other data sets to work our way along the route, and we'll be looking at farms big and small. And I guess just to reiterate what we were saying before, if we are here to listen about what people have got to say, so we don't want to fall into the trap of thinking, oh well, it's all just standard traditional agriculture along the whole route. If there's people doing different things, if there are things that they think might not show up and might not be aware of, we're interested to hear that. But we will be making every effort to assess the detail along the route, as well as the broad material that I've, which is informed, I guess, by the broad material I've shown tonight.
And again, Duncan, I guess, so there's we're taking all that information, big, small, or medium-sized farming, and I guess another reason why, we've got vacancies open for one-on-one sessions with people like yourself and subject matter experts to have those discussions. So the encouragement would be there for those people to put their hand up and make a booking. So if you do have a farm, no matter how big or small it is, and you want to get your specific circumstances around what you're doing on your farm and how you're working it, and how you think, or some of the questions you may have, like I said, really encourage you to make one of those bookings for a one-on-one session, which would be great. Just going back to the questions as they filter in. We've got one from Bob. Bob has asked, how much does the potato farming areas in the area of interest contribute to McCain's overall supply?
Right. So, look, I think that's not such an easy question. I think we saw in the mapping there that the footprint, if you like, of the potato industry is matches pretty well to those really good soils and the land production potential. We've uncovered a map of back in the 1940s, which shows that what the potato industry footprint was back then, and it hasn't changed a lot. So the area of interest is obviously a lot wider than the transmission line itself will be. So the area of interest, there is a lot of potato production grown in there, and we haven't calculated or tried to calculate what the area within that area of interest is compared to the area outside of the area of interest is, because that answer doesn't really inform our study. But I guess the answer is that the area of interest does go through that prime country, and there are potatoes grown in there. I honestly couldn't give you a categorical answer on sort of what proportion of the product that gets processed by McCain's in Ballarat comes from within or outside of that study room.
Okay, we can potentially take it offline too and provide an answer back.
Okay, I think just to finish, I think what we will be doing though is when we're looking at the impact assessment, we'll be making an assessment along the route, and we will be quantifying, if you like, the amount and making an estimate of what that loss of production could be based upon the actual what we feel as though the actual is. So literally looking at the individual properties along there that are affected, working out whether or not we think they're potato ones, and then we'll be in a position then to quantify the impact of the project, I guess, which is more of our focus than what proportion of that study area was potato.
Which is work we're currently undertaking, correct, Duncan? Yeah. Okay. All right. Another question from Anne, who's shot one in. Duncan, removal of the trees for the transmission easement will expose my land to wind and erosion. How will AusNet prevent this from happening?
That is a good question. I guess the removal of the trees underneath so trees can play that role on the farm, and there are some fragile parts of the study area which subject to erosion that can be clearly seen from the air, and vegetation, tree cover can be an important control in that. But the rules underneath that corridor, if the transmission line was built, there are height limits on the types of vegetation that can be built, grown under there. I imagine that the correct thing to do would be to look for and find and plant those lower habitat, trees, shrubs, grasses, things like that, which can grow along there and provide that function of retaining the water, holding the soil, and minimising the erosion. I guess the reverse of that would be to say, well, if we took the strip of land and denuded it and left it, then I agree that would be a risk, particularly in some areas where it's steeper and the lighter soil types. So there will need to be some effort made to get that vegetation growing, albeit at a reduced height because of the limits,
the restriction
for the transmission line.
Okay, good. Thank you for that, and hopefully that answers your question there. We've still got time for a few more, which we've got. Ron's asked, what is the state of the forestry industry, particularly the blue gums and pines within the area?
Yeah, I guess it's not my specialty. We have a sub consultant who's giving us advice in relation to the forestry and the commercial activities. It is what it is, I guess, is not a helpful answer, but again, looking at aerial photographs, it can be seen that there are trends in areas where there's might be forestry that's been cleared and perhaps not put back into forestry, but reverted back to sort of pasture-based agriculture rather than the forestry. I personally can't comment too much, I guess, on the commercial aspects of forestry, but it's kind of like another commodity, a little bit like I was discussing before, in the sense that a farmer can choose, or a forester can choose whether or not to grow that as a forest or grow grass and have pastures and things like that. So the market really dictates that. And as I say, sorry, I'm not really an expert on that forestry market. But again, we do have a forester who is part of our team, and I can get David onto that if there's a specific question.
Okay, no worries. Thanks for that, Duncan. Got a couple more that hopefully we can get through. So Michael's put through, what trends in agriculture do you see for the areas nearer to Melton?
So it's interesting around Melton. And we've spoken to all the different councils along the route and got some of their views. And being so close to metropolitan Melbourne, there's lots of land, town planning, land use, zoning, kind of management that's done there. That's sort of not so much a thing out in the west. At the moment, there's a lot of greenwedge land there, which is, I guess, earmarked not for urban. And again, I'm not a town planner here, but what that means in terms of the agriculture in that area, so I'm talking here specifically between Melton and Calder Park Raceway, I guess, which is the start of the project. It's still used for productive agriculture, possibly more as share farmers are using it to sort of in the middle. It might be that some of the land isn't owned by traditional family farmers any longer. It's caught up in the development thing. I couldn't predict what's going to happen in the long term. Possibly it could grow houses. That's one option. If it doesn't grow houses, I guess there's always going to be opportunistic people trying to get the most value out of the land from an agricultural point of view. It's very close to an urban area. I think things like dogs and other animals, stray animals like that, would be problematic for sheep farming. I mean, you wouldn't want to have a mob of using lambs, I wouldn't think, so close to the urban areas there, perhaps. So I think what we see there on the land, on the ground at the moment, is probably where it's headed. It's pretty stable. There's some pretty good crops grown, and it's sort of that's where it is now. Okay.
And probably the last one we'll get to, but probably been answered a bit. So Anna's put in, how can I ensure that you understand what this means to my farming operations, and as everyone's family business is different. And I mean, happy for you to take that one, Duncan, if you like. We've probably answered a little bit in relation to how we best get to understand that, but yeah, another one for you.
So again, we're trying to, I guess, connect to things from different angles, looking at things at broad scale, looking at things from detailed scale, getting individual people's contributions. you can actually see a lot from detailed aerial imagery and pick up what's people are doing on the land. And we will be trying to assess the impacts of the proposed transmission line on that as best we can. So I guess, yeah, I feel as though we've tried to cover that. I've tried to demonstrate that we're aware that, you know, farming isn't farming, that there's different people approach it differently. We will be trying to keep an open mind about what people are doing on their land and assess the impacts in that sort of framework.
Thanks for that. Have we got any other questions before we wrap up? We've still got maybe a minute to take one or two if anyone's got one they want to flick through. What will we can see some people typing away a little bit.
I could just add one thing about that. The
Yep.
Melton, the western end of the job, I didn't say it before, but I know that there's the management, there's concerned about the way the agricultural land's managed there, I guess, because some of it isn't farmed well, and some of it is gets a bit weedy. There are some quite nasty weeds that we know about down in that part of the world. So one of the challenges in that sort of urban fringe is that the agricultural land is managed well, because we don't want them to be sources of, you know, serrated tussock, artichoke thistle, things like that. So if you've got land that's just left as wasteland, then that's not it's not really good for anybody.
Right. Okay. So I think that's pretty much it in relation to the questions we've got for this evening. So we thank, so on behalf of the team and the program team entirely, Duncan, thank you for the time you've given up this evening and through that very detailed report and answering those questions that have come in from people. On behalf of myself and the stakeholder engagement team and the wider AusNet team, thank you everyone for attending tonight. We'll be sending out a link for the online survey shortly. So if you could take some time to provide us some of the feedback of how we can make this this process a little bit easier for you or better in any way, we're more than happy to take on some feedback. If you'd like to go to our website, we've mentioned it a couple of times tonight to book a one-on-one session. So there'll be sessions available with Duncan, especially around agriculture and forestry, should you do that, but also some of our other topics, including bushfire, compensation, visual amenity, so a number of different topics there. Also at the website, there's plenty of fact sheets there available too, especially ones pertinent tonight around the living and working with the Western Vic Transmission Network project, high voltage transmission. So the fact sheet will be on there, which obviously relates a fair bit to some of the stuff that Duncan's presented this evening. So thanks to everyone for this evening again. We have another webinar. We've got one left in this series of engagement webinars, and that's tomorrow night on landscape and visual amenity. So I encourage everyone to register for that as you have for this one. We'll be kicking off at the same time with another technical specialist looking at the existing conditions there. If you or anyone else has any further questions or queries, please feel free to email our team at the info@westernvictnp.com.au and we can follow up anything else for you. I guess we understand obviously that this project has caused some uncertainty and some concern for many members of the community. So we encourage you to reach out to one of the support services up on the screen at the moment to provide providers if needed. So if you or one of your loved ones or a community member is in need of some of that support, please feel free to reach out to these there. All confidential, entirely confidential, free to access, and we would encourage people to do so. Thanks again, everyone, and have a wonderful evening. Duncan, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you.